Good morning, kia ora everyone. My name's BRaided Rivers. I'm based in the Department of Conservation Office at Rakitata Awa. My role there is a river ranger. I'm part of the Awa program, and at times I can appear sort of siloed and isolated because I'm one of 14 rangers nationally. So I don't tend to have a large group of like personnel on my site. However, what I do have is tons of people involved in river work throughout our area, and that includes within our office. They work in different streams and functional groups within the department, but there's actually a huge, massive work going on within South Canterbury, and I just wanted this talk really to acknowledge those people. So hopefully that's what comes through. So I want to take a minute to give you an update on the Rakitata Awa project before we move on to some reflections on the river. So the Rakitata, in 2011, the New Zealand Conservation Authority made quite a thick and weighty report to the Minister of Conservation, and the outcome from that was it really noted the declines in river quality across New Zealand, loss of intrinsic values, and the inability of mana whenua to be involved in decision making and active management in the rivers. So that sat on the back burner for a long time, but in 2018, the Minister announced a new funding stream as part of a funding increase given to the department at that time called Bio 2018. And that was basically an announcement that word for word mirrored the recommendations of that report. And that is that 14 rivers nationally would be supported to establish restoration projects to allow mana whenua to be active kaitiaki and to also lead the restoration of these rivers kia ora ki tai, from mountain to sea. So unfortunately, kia ora ki tai has become one of those sexy terms that in some ways has been appropriated, and mountains to the sea is the way it's often viewed. But holistically, it's really significant to kaitahu, and it actually encompasses all of the biotic and abiotic relationships occurring across our rivers. And it also encompasses the spiritual and the physical side of the awa. So really significant, that idea. On the east coast of the South Island here, both the Waitaki and the Rakitata were nominated as part of this project. And to be fair, the department's funding was relatively meagre compared to the size of the task to restore major catchment systems. And it was always going to be dependent on how well we could partner and form stakeholder and community engagement. Across New Zealand, implementation of these rivers has varied in style, pace, and the objectives. And it's been completely dependent on the characteristics of local issues, communities, the rivers themselves, and the capacity for resourcing. So some are still in the conceptual phase, some haven't even kicked off. Some are well advanced and already had steering groups or governance groups in place across agencies and communities, and they progress very quickly. So the Rakitata now is at a critical juncture. DOC and Runaka Auara Whenua, together with LINZ, Fish and Game ECAN, and the territorial authorities, ADC and TDC, district authorities, sorry, now have an understanding of what we would like from the project and what our boundaries are. We agree on a unified vision to restore the Māori of the awa, and we have a draft strategy, ko te whakahau manu o te Rakitata Awa, to restore the Māori of the river. We've become somewhat sidelined along the way with the opportunities that have grown to capture large funding packages, and we've begun scoping what restoration could be across the awa and started implementation. To this ends, we plan to reach out across our wider Rakitata community now to align and support and engage with them and share our common vision. So that is where we're really placed at the moment. Finally, I need to acknowledge the efforts, passion and drive of our Rakitata community and everyone else in this room who's engaged in river revival. In river conservation conferences, we often talk about science, we talk about new technologies, new developments, new risks, new management techniques, new processes. But what it comes down to at the end of it is the individual people and relationships that you hold with your river. They will be what will guide restoration for New Zealand in the future. So although I don't share all of the author's ideas of some reflections that I'm going to read out, I just wanted to read these to you. These reflections come from a member of the Arawhenua nursery and they were captured because he absent-mindedly left some of his notes in my truck. And we all know what happens when someone leaves something in your truck. That gives you full patent and copyright rights, doesn't it? So there we go. I'd just like to have a crack and see if I can just start the slideshow at the same time. Maybe it can give some context to what's going on in the river as well. I valued the walk around with Brad the other day. See, I told you I didn't write this. Every day adds value to the story and journey that is unfolding, that we are on as a wider group, inclusive of all our stakeholders. We have a rare opportunity to create and recreate pockets and corridors of outstanding ecological and environmental value on the Rakitata River. Currently, we are in this hinterland between commerce and conservation. Currently, conservation is taking a back seat as stakeholders grapple with the big picture. Much of what is unfolding is in the overwhelm basket. We're all reading the same book. Some folks are on different chapters, very few are on the same page. As a group that shares the conservation space, it's a matter of creating the opportunities for folks to catch up and share in that page. Sometimes the best way forward is to reflect back and observe. In that reflection, there are stories that need to be told. Having lived on the Awa for some time, you get to learn its moods and intrinsic values. It is a living and dynamic thing. Before corporate arrived and decided to turn the Canterbury Plains into a green desert, there were so many populations of real conservation gold that were destroyed with that transition. Reflecting, we used to collect seed from this area, and some of the plants were over 100 years old. Every loss creates its unique challenges, none more so than the Coprosma species. Having male and female parts, they hybridize very readily, so it presents issues finding specimens true to form. So when they're indiscriminately culled, the loss is immeasurable. So it's coming through very strongly that this person is a botanist and engaged in nursery work, and that's the flavour of their reflection. But these reflections could have easily been taken from any of the people working on our awa. It could have come from the Kaitiaki rangers from Arawhenua. It could have come from the people in the dock office. It could have come from the ECAN staff or the LINZ staff. It could have come from the fish and game officers, or it could have come from individuals in our wider community. Community groups like the Landcare group that are in place. The phone rang and there was a developer on the other end in a flat. As we know, tikoka and pivots are not compatible friends. They had been cutting the tikoka down. Got pinged, so then proceeded to dig them up with a 20 tonner and transplant them midsummer into a shingle pit. The inquiry, they were all dying. What to do? Yet still patting themselves on the back for being conservation minded. The crowd was screaming, the specimens were unique and the loss went straight over the heads of the developers. These behaviours have been occurring for a couple of decades. The biggest loser is the environment. Previous generations planted shelter on the plains for good reason. When we first landed on Rakitata Island, it blew the nor'wester every day. For about 6 weeks, I have seen lush pastures burnt tinder dry by mid-afternoon. This speaks of the environment. We can be fooled by the current green, lush, artificial landscape that we currently observe. It is a harsh environment and one that needs to be understood and respected in order to thrive and survive. On the top side of the river, it can be still as. You go down that cutting onto the first bridge and you hit a Category 5 hurricane. One day we were planting above Ealing Springs. You could see the dust blowing in billows down the river, yet we were watching from the terraces in stillness. You can be lulled into a false sense of security. In the back of my mind is the old saying, you're only one oyster away from a drought in Canterbury. Observation can be the key to creating positive outcomes. Speaking to this, we are training our seed collection team to observe the environment they are operating in. We are looking for old and unique specimens. We are sitting listening to the birds' song, observing where they are flying, what trees and shrubs they are visiting, observing the greater Rakitata from Arundel up to the saddle. It's this lush and growing environment. Hit White Rock Station and the environment changes to that of a harsh dryland scene. The introduction of pivots at Messi have introduced a new dynamic into that environment. If we look at the lower Rakitata, without irrigation, much of the land would revert to its savanna grassland ecosystem. Some sheep to the acre and subsistence struggles streets farming, where the rabbits had to take a cut lunch. When thinking of restoration, we need to reflect on what was and what still is in the river ecosystem. We can be the driver of what we seek to plant within the associated restoration areas. One of the gigs I'm running within the program is the need for seed. Every Monday, staff are turning up with their treasure finds. Keep an eye out for natives with seeds in your travels. It is quite infectious and leads to some robust conversations. Some of the restoration crew have been asking about the volunteers on the river. There's a story behind that. Back in the day, the mill chimps operated a nursery in Tynwald, Ashburton. They were attending a wedding in Harata, midwinter in a memorial hall, and on the wall were branches of koa and flower. Nursery mangold. Consequently, they propagated the trees for the early flowering. The story goes on. Mr. Millchimp of the day was a keen fisher, so every time he went fishing, he would take trees and shrub seedlings with him, which he would plant on the Rakitata. Many of them are still there today. Some are generationally spreading down the Awa. There are koa growing beside State Highway 1. These were removed when the passing lanes went in. They are now lost. They came from a nursery in Tynwald. It has fallen to Subdivision Creek, planted by a conservationist relating to his environment. Looking with today's lens, should they be there or not? You can still see expression of his work in the river. True story or not, I was inspired. So over the years, I've adopted this approach, mindful of the environment that plants are going to go into. They tend to be selective. The cool thing is that besides the tree, you are the only person who knows what's going on. Reflecting on the restoration, we have the same opportunity to re-establish what could or would have been, enhancing the river ecosystem. By observing what is actually in the system already, we have a roadmap that can be enhanced further. Further to this, we have the opportunity to reintroduce declining rare and endangered species in the restoration areas. This was brought home to me when we were collecting seed at the Wakanui Beach Reserve. As a group, they are so dedicated to enhancing that coastal environment, proliferating some of the rare specimens that are occurring naturally. We have the same opportunity. I was challenged with the realization that with some of these specimens there, some of these specimens are minimal populations presence at Canterbury at large. Speaking to that, I'm pretty sure I observed a specimen of Mullumbeckia ephendroides growing in the Hapua. When I made it back to the river, it had carved it out with a fresh on the bank. The restoration is going to be that ebb and flow. Meticulous planning, delivery and site maintenance and measuring performance will greatly enhance our ability to create successful outcomes. The more I think about the restoration project, it is bigger than its moving parts. There is a need to develop a working overview that speaks of the goals and the aspirations of the project at large. We could lose over 1 million plants from the coast to the gorge and then only be scratching the surface. It's one thing to create a vision, it's a totally different thing selling the vision and creating buy-in and delivery. Within the environs, we have some strong personalities. Those can create flashpoints which can bring unnecessary pressures to the project. In any project, there will be points that are challenging. And with this project, I see the risk adversity starting to express itself in the preservation of self-interest. We need to keep the aspiration flowing. At every point, it is the awa, the awa, the awa that needs to take centre stage, and all the people and stakeholders need to become stadium players and work together as a team. If we can establish a solid foundation, we can continue to build beyond the current funding cycle. The nursery at Arowhenua will play a critical role in this journey. That work will fall to the rangatahi that are becoming involved in this project. With the right inputs and mentoring, they will become tomorrow's leaders. The restoration project for the Rakitata is aspirational, and if we continue to be strategic in our approach over the lifetime of our program, we will see some extraordinary results. It will be interesting to see the results in year 2, 3, and 4. The results will be spectacular and hopefully create a model for best practice for river restoration and enhancement. Thank you.